Hello, everyone. So thank you for joining me today. I have Julie Bean here with us today. Now, Julie is the Executive Director of the Attachment and Trauma Network. Now, this is a worldwide organisation, and Julie's here to discuss her journey within the network, the organisation, how it came to be. Julie's also a parent to a child that's been affected by trauma, which was a really cool drive to the beginning of this organisation. So I would like to welcome you, Julie, and thank you very much for joining us here. I know it's there's a big time difference between us both, so thank you for making it work.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Jessica. Thank you for making it work. We found a time when both of us are awake and not sleeping, so that's a good thing, right?
That's right. So, Julie, I'd love to hear, I guess, maybe just a brief introduction of yourself. And your journey to creating the Attachment and Trauma Network, how that came to be.
Sure. Well, first off, I've got to tell you that I didn't create, I found it. It was already in existence. In fact, the Attachment and Trauma Network will be 25 years old this year.
Wow.
So that's a long time of trying to support parents and help them learn about early childhood trauma. But ATN was a lifeline to me back in 1998 and 1999, right after we brought our fourth child home from China. She's the only one from China. I said that kind of awkwardly. Our youngest child, who we adopted from China. There we go. And we knew pretty quickly that there was something different about her and the way that she was developing versus our other children who had come to us as biological or stepchildren. And so we knew we were looking for help, but we didn't know what kind of help. So our local resources of early intervention or of the adoption agencies were really not able to quite put a finger on that. And we went through the traditional, resources of child development and pediatricians and people sort of scratching their head because she struggled developmentally in many ways, and then in other ways she caught up. When she first came to us, she had not been given much of an opportunity to move or to do things like experience solid food or attempt to walk, and she was nearly 2 years old at that point. So there was quick catch up physically. I mean, before we left China, she was walking, and about a week and a half to 2 weeks after we got her home, she was running. She was literally that little toddler run across the room. Wow. So she would crawl a lot, but she would also just get up and take off, and her teeth that were way behind came in almost, instantaneously, sort of en masse within just weeks. Wow. Nutrition will do a lot of things, but then there were other things that just weren't happening. We knew from the facilitators that were speaking both Mandarin and Cantonese should have been her language, that she really didn't understand. She wasn't responsive to any of that. So it's like, okay, she's not really trying to make language sounds, and she's, and there were all of those delays. And then there was just a whole lack of sleep, that she was having trouble sleeping or sleeping for any extended period of time. Yeah. And it took a while, and I now know it's because she was probably in a major a trauma freeze state, probably 6 to 8 months before she just started melting down into these really sad and long rage sort of sessions that some people would describe or try to explain away as tantrums. And I was like, yeah, I've never seen a kid do that. For that long without the ability for you to reach in and do something for her. Looking back now, 20 years ago, what I didn't know then that I do know now is that all of that was trauma. All of it was around, that what she didn't get in her early months of life. And that, that what the history of what I know that happened to her, from day 2 when she showed up at the orphanage until 20 months when we showed up at the orphanage, are that she really didn't have much interaction in a typical way. She was fed on schedule. She wasn't fed solid food. She really wasn't played with or interacted with much, because there were just too many signs for it to be otherwise. And so then there we were with this child where we thought, well, we have some pretty decent parenting skills, but we're not sure what to do with this. And of course, by that time, everybody's sleep deprived because we'd really only been sleeping in about 2-hour stretches, right?
Sure.
So, so I didn't know what to do with that information, since there wasn't, I live in a fairly major metropolitan area where, where on the surface you would think, man, there's got to be a ton of resources here. But nobody was really saying to me, well, your child has got attachment issues or trauma issues, or, and pointing me in that direction. So I turned to a 20-year-old ago internet, if you can imagine what the internet was like 20 years ago, and we're doing the dial-up, right?
Yeah.
That to look for answers, and out there was a core group of parents who were talking about this thing among themselves. Most of them were internationally adoptive parents, and they were saying, these are the things that are happening. And just the ability to know someone else was going through the same thing was so empowering and relieving all at the same time. It's like, okay, so this isn't me being the crazy mom. This isn't us not being good enough parents. This isn't a rejection of us, because a lot of times the things that become attachment related really do feel like a rejection, right?
That's right.
So that was a huge step forward emotionally for me in particular, and for my husband and our family too, to be able to meet other people and know what there was. The challenging thing was that there wasn't anything, there wasn't a whole lot to do about it yet. We were still as a sort of a core group of wanderers in the desert going, okay, so what are we going to do? Sure. But within that group was a woman named Nancy Spoolstra, who was the founder of the Attachment and Trauma Network. And at that point in time, it was just a core group of parents who were meeting for coffee or dinner, trying to figure out what to do in Kansas City, in the center of the United States. And because she had been pretty vocal about what they were doing, was getting phone calls and emails from parents all over. So she was trying to figure out how to handle that in some meaningful way. And she was, bringing what the experts that she could find in to do workshops, and, was really just trying to figure out where this could go. And so I started leaning on the network that she was building, and we spent hours on the internet and on the phone. And eventually I and some others said, we'll volunteer and help you, and we'll start to do, a newsletter, which has now become a journal, and and some events, and try to help parents. And the core of it was online support, which has always been the mainstay core of our parent program, is an online support and helping them to find resources, whether you're in crisis or just in a peer-to-peer, let's have a conversation, because there's such power in me saying, this is what my child did today, and I have no idea how I'm supposed to, what I'm supposed to do with that. And somebody across the country saying, this is what I did, and it may not be exactly what works, but at least you're not alone, and you have some idea of where to go. So that's the core of where ATN went. Now, in the last 10 years, because this is my 10th year as the executive director, in the last 10 years, the world has come to us in a big way. We know that families still do not feel as empowered or as full of resources as they need to be to do this incredible work that needs to be done to help these children. but man, there's a lot of good stuff out there, including all of the body work that I know we'll be talking about later. And so for me, it's an exciting thing to know that there's so much more, and people are really understanding it. The brain science is backing up what we were seeing in our homes 20 years ago.
Sure.
And now at ATN, we're even able to get the schools and the teachers involved and go out and do professional development training for them. And so we're really excited about where the future is going, because we think that more and more people are becoming aware of the challenges and the need to support the families that are doing this healing work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said about having a community or support around you is so important. You know, a lot of the parents that I speak to, they feel so utterly alone. And when you're exhausted, disempowered, and you have nowhere to turn, feeling disconnected from your friends, peers, family is not a very nice place to be. So the group work and what you're providing, and what I will start to provide with Australian or with Queensland families is such an important piece of getting through those difficult times, like you explained and mentioned that you went through.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for raising that. It's a really important piece of the healing work. So within the ATN, Julie, I guess how do you operate globally? You said that a lot of it is done online, and you have a journal as well. So
yes.
I guess what's the core piece of your work, and how's it delivered? What are the main themes, I guess, that the network focuses on?
Well, the core piece of our work initially was our parenting, and is our parenting program, to make sure that parents don't feel alone. And because we are serving people globally at this point, we do that online. There's no other way to do that. There's really no other way to do that in the States anyway. It's too big, right?
Yeah.
So we have online support groups that members can get into. We have a free membership policy if you are parenting a child that's been impacted by trauma. And the base membership. Now you can do things to enhance that membership by paying money to have a journal mailed to you, and some discounts for various webinars and things that aren't free. But the free basic membership gets you assigned into a support group that is monitored by an experienced therapeutic parent, but also is peer-to-peer, and gets you our journal that is published 3 times a year, and it comes to you electronically. So there's not a mailed piece, but it's a nice full-colored journal that is written by professionals or experienced therapeutic parents, and the topics are always on point for it's totally focused on attachment and trauma type issues. And so we do some that are like school articles, and some that are articles about perhaps how to handle sibling situations, or how to handle holiday stress, or there's usually a different theme. We've done a theme on shame. We've done so it's various different. Our editorial staff brainstorms and tries to figure out what topic in particular, and we've been really fortunate because of our history to be able to tap some experts, to write for us or to be interviewed for us, and so there's a lot of richness there in the journal articles, as well as some free webinars that are available in our members only area. We also have other things that are in our store that are open to the public, and there's obviously membership discounts for that as well. So that's how the parenting program operates. And about 3 years ago, the school program came to fruition by a core group of our members who didn't even know each other, but just started talking to me about the need to get trauma-informed schools training going, and that they were educators as well as parents of children impacted by trauma, and they were doing it locally. So after that happened about 4 or 5 times in about a 6-month span, the 2x4 hit my head, and I was like, well, wait, if these people all knew each other, maybe something could actually happen.
Okay.
So we pulled ourselves together in a location, which rarely happens at ATN, and sat in front of each other at a table at a lunch that was supposed to last an hour and a half, and 5 hours later they asked us to leave the restaurant because there was such passion there, right?
Sure.
And the birth of our Creating Trauma Sensitive Schools program was started there, where that team goes out and does training wherever they're invited, professional development training in specific school districts. And we've done it in 15 states in the States so far. We have not left the United States, although I think that's probably coming. And then last year we started hosting an annual conference in Washington, D.C. So this year will be the second one. It's coming up in 3 weeks. So trying to breathe and be calm. Yeah. We have over 1,000 people registered so far. So there are 1,000 educators coming from everywhere, including Australia. We've got some from Africa and some from England and South Africa, and lots of people from Canada, and a whole Hawaii contingency we're excited about. And it's incredible to see. We'll be doing 2 days, 75 workshops. It's going to be incredible to know that many educators are going back to their schools with some solid information about what to do with kids who've been impacted by trauma. So those two programs seem vastly different sometimes to everybody, because the parents will call up or email me and say, should we come to the conference? And I'm like, well, I don't want to discourage you from coming to the conference, because of course you'll learn something, but you've got to remember that this is really pointed towards what can teachers and school system administrators do. And so while there's a lot of learning on models and even sensory and other types of things that educators should know, it's also, how do you structure your classroom, and how do you set up so that you can handle, so that you're not re-traumatizing children, and those types of things. So Amazing. The impact is really being spread quite wide with those types of events. It's starting to really grow, and we're looking forward to what the next 25 years are going to be. Who knows? But it's definitely going to continue getting bigger, I'm sure, and hopefully some more international work as well. That would be wonderful. Yes. So, Julie, we've been using words such as attachment and trauma. So I'd love it if you could, provide a definition or an explanation of what those terms mean when we mention those. Right. Okay, so attachment, you can probably, either one of them you could go for a straight definition of, but in our work, the reason that ATN is named the Attachment and Trauma Network is that attachment is the building block, that the relationship that ideally an infant has with their primary caregiver. And that is being shown over and over again to be the main building block of resilience in our children. So when we talk about what it is that helps a child heal from trauma, we often talk about resilience, and especially we're finding that schools and other community folks are talking a great deal about resilience. But the understanding is that attachment is at the core of that, or a relationship, an early relationship is at the core of that. Attachment is also important in that a lot of children who have traumatic impacts, on the severe end of things, a lot of the children whose parents become members of ATN get a diagnosis of an attachment disorder. And so understanding what that means, what it means to have that relational disorder as, at the core of what's going on. I tell parents that you have to understand straight up that you cannot have an attachment disorder without having been traumatized. That's now wide knowledge that we didn't have 20 years ago, but we do now. And the inverse is not true. You can be traumatized and not have an attachment disorder, but you cannot. You have to know, you have to delve into to the trauma side of things when you're working with or disordered attachment, to be able to help them. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely it does. And I guess when we talk about trauma, quite often it can be, if you're not in the realm of trauma, it can be very a far off concept. So for you and your organisation, what does trauma mean for these children?
It's any event or situation that causes a child to be afraid and feel hopeless, like like they have no control over what is happening to them. And so trauma is really in the eye of the beholder, of the person themselves. It's not something that someone else can look at that and say, well, that shouldn't have traumatized you. Type situation. It's what is being felt on the inside, which makes it a little tough to identify sometimes, because it doesn't seem, from adult eyes, a lot of times whatever the trauma was or the traumas are sometimes might not seem as significant. And where we run into that a lot is when we have families whose children have been maybe been preemies, been born early, or that they've had lots of surgeries at birth, and they start exhibiting traumatized behaviors, and the parents and the professionals are sort of confused, and they're like, but well, there was nothing traumatic that happened. We were doing what we needed to do to save this child's life. Well, yes, you were doing all the right things to save the child's life, but in the process, the child felt totally helpless and hopeless because they had no control over their situation, and when they cried, nobody responded in an appropriately nurturing way because they couldn't. We know the adult reasons why they didn't, but that's still not what the child felt, and so the scaffolding was built there.
Yeah, perfect. That's exactly right. And that makes a lot of sense with what you were saying. You can, if you have an attachment disorder, you are going to have experienced trauma or suffer from trauma, but the reverse is not always accurate. So you can have a really great attachment with your primary caregivers, and the traumatic event may happen when you're 5, 6 years old, and it's a one-off event, and yes, it's traumatic for you. So that's a perfect explanation as to how that works. And so I guess with all of the years that you've been in the organisation, Julie, and I guess with your daughter, what do you see, or what do parents come to you with being the main impacts of an attachment disorder or trauma? What are they seeing? What are they needing the most support with? What behaviours?
Well, that's so variable, Jessica, because every child is so different. Yeah. The ones who generally call us in crisis are calling because whatever behaviors are being exhibited are usually dangerous in some way, and that's dangerous to the child themselves, like in a self-harming kind of way, or dangerous to the family in some way, or dangerous to another child. And that's usually, and we also seem to, the crises seem to occur at almost predictable developmental points. So a lot of times people can bring a child that's been impacted by trauma, especially one that has an attachment disorder, into their homes, and things go along well for a while, and then things start to escalate. And usually a lot of times those escalations happen when they around preschool years, when you start to send them to preschool, sometimes when you start to send them to school. Sometimes children can go along really well or pretty well, so sort of the family can muddle through with whatever it is that they think they're experiencing until puberty hits, and then that's another big time frame. And then our children who've been impacted by trauma, especially if it's a relational trauma, like an attachment
Yeah.
based trauma, or or going through having several caregivers, or going through an adoption process, seem to have problems again at high school, right at the very end when they're about to launch into adulthood. That seems to be a problematic time too. And so those are sort of the time frames of when whatever the child is exhibiting, whether it's self-harming or whether it's harming others, or whether it's withdrawing more, that they seem to escalate at those times a lot. And so that's when families will reach out in those predictable times and say, please help us find resources. And which to me is a little bit, I mean, it's always sad to me when someone waits till their child is in puberty or high school to come looking for resources, when they really saw things early on that just seemed a little off, like they might have been able to keep a lid on whatever that was, just sort of like, okay, well, we're just past that little crisis and we're going, instead of exploring, what could we do? Because there's a lot of research out there that shows that the earlier we're able to help these children, the more the help is, the exponentially more the help is able to help them heal. And they can, it's harder the longer, from a brain development standpoint, the longer that we wait to really address these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And within Australia, we definitely, I mean, the government is trying to put a lot of funding into prevention rather than cure, so to speak. So we're definitely trying to go on that route. Still a long way to go, but at least it's becoming common knowledge now that, like you say, prevention really is the best way to go for these children.
Yes.
And so I guess when you discuss it, there's a lot of resources out there, Julie, for families, when they're in these crisis situations. What can you share what these resources are, or what would be the most beneficial routes for them to go down? I understand that every family and child is different, like you say. Right. What would be the next steps for them when they reach out to you?
Well, at ATN, we feel pretty strongly that everybody seeks some kind of therapeutic help, that you don't try to do it as a family alone, that you get a trained clinician in your corner, so to speak, and that person hopefully will know enough about attachment disorders and trauma to know that they need to work with you as a family, and talk to you, make sure that you understand what they consider their course of action with the child. So that's important, because you're really working in concert with them. You go home and you're going to parent this child for a lot more hours than whatever they're working with the professional. And so you need to reinforce whatever's happening there, and they need to understand enough about, they need to help you by coaching and supporting and giving you ideas about what you can do, and what type of professional that is can vary. There are trauma-informed, evidence-based strategies that various clinicians practice. Everything from here in the States, we have a lot of families that are foster and adoptive families using TBRI and some of those models, and the therapists are trained in that. There's EMDR, which is the gold standard of a PTSD type.
Yeah.
There are varying sensory and body works that can be done, and things like neurofeedback. So there are a variety of things. What does not work for children of trauma is traditional talk therapy. It just doesn't work. And there aren't enough people that say, I mean, we all say it, and there's still not enough people that say it, because there are still people who are trying to use cognitive behavioral therapy, basic talk therapy with children who've been impacted by trauma. And the brain science is all over the reason that doesn't work, because where your brain is impacted by trauma is in your limbic system, in the center of your brain, where your language center can't access that. There's all kinds of reasons that that you're not able to access your trauma with language. And when you're a child in particular, especially if that trauma occurred before you have the language, you definitely are not going to access it.
Exactly.
So if you're paying a therapist to talk to your child about their trauma, you're probably not getting very far. And if you are, good, keep doing it. I mean, I'm all for whatever helps your child heal. But don't be surprised if you don't get very far, and you might be looking for other things. They have to be experiential things, of which the movement therapies and the sensory things are highly useful in that realm. And and when then the very follow-on next question when parents are talking to me about therapies and resources is, well, which one do I do first? And I wish I had that crystal ball that I could say, well, you should do them in this order, and you should do them for this long, and here are the people you should do them with. Can't do that. But you have to do, most parents take the resources that are closest to them, the ones that they can find, obviously. I think you have to sort of gauge what your child needs and really sort of become aware of where they are developmentally, and then try it. I mean, for us, there were times where it was really obvious to me that the typical attachment and trauma therapies, we did a lot of therapies that were sort of theraplay based and psychodrama based, and they worked really well at certain times. But other times my daughter needed her brain to be calmed in a different way. So she needed something else. She needed needed a body work or a sensory work, or she needed a neurofeedback or something. And so sometimes we were doing them together, like within the same time period. And sometimes we would stop the traditional trauma therapy and go do something else for a while, and then come back and pick it up. So
okay, thank you. That's great information, and completely agree that the talking therapies are just not effective based on everything you just said. So thank God the science is really there to back that up now.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we've mentioned now a little bit about, body therapies and, sensory stuff, which really is about that body-brain connection and really connecting with your body awareness. A big impact of trauma is, disassociating from your body, disconnecting from it, because that is the seat of the pain, the trauma, or that's where it's stored. It's a very scary place. Even when you are consciously aware of it, sometimes it's a scary place. So for these children, it's a lot easier just to disassociate. So I'd love to know, I guess, your experience with that with your daughter, how that showed up for your daughter and how that shows up with other children potentially, but just how you see the importance of working with the body when it comes to trauma.
Well, there's all kinds of growing evidence that that your body is storing that trauma someplace in your body. With my daughter, she was a child of significant neglect. So because she didn't have a lot of sensory input, or any sensory input in some ways, her entire sensory system and mind-body connection was not activated from the start. Was like, so it was developmentally way off. And I think one of the first most striking things that happened that I went, oh wow, there's something going on here with this one, is that she was about 3, and we were in a home and garden store buying flowers and things for the yard, and I had this like big cart with all of the flowers and the dirt and things on it, and she was running full bore directly at me and stumbled and slid across the concrete pavement of the store and stood up, and both of her knees were bloodied, and of course I'm like trying to get to her from the line of the people and over my cart and stuff to scoop her up, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she's really hurt herself. She looks down on her knees with a disgusted look on her face, kind of makes a grunt, and then just walks away. like there was, no tears, there was no crying, there was no nothing. And, I mean, and she was like bleeding significant. I mean, it wasn't like, it was a life-threatening situation, but it wasn't a little scrape either. It was like, every other 3-year-old that I've ever seen would have not, it would have sought their mom immediately and just been almost unconsolable, right?
Yeah.
And there she was. And yet as she matured, little things like paper cuts or hangnails or things that are painful but aren't life-altering painful would become a big situation for us. So her pain sensors were way off in terms of, she just, the big pains, the significant injury type things were things that she didn't necessarily feel, and then the others were. And even as we continued to do therapies, her pain sensory reception sort of shifted around. Sometimes she would be like hypersensitive, and sometimes she would be hyposensitive, and it would kind of go back and forth. And she still struggles a little. I think what she struggles with that's the most obvious to her and to us, and we do a lot of talking about it now in her 20s, is when she's hungry and when she's full. She has trouble figuring that out, because she's disconnected there and in such a magnitude way. And if you are hungry and fed on a schedule in a crib for 2 years, then of course you're going to dissociate from that feeling of hunger. You're not going to be in touch with that. And so she will, she'll just get so nasty when she's hungry. And it's just, it's just become such a routine for all of us to check her hunger level anytime that she's out of sorts in any way. It's like, when was the last time you ate? Okay. Because that's been a huge trigger for her. And there have been times that she's struggled with determining when she's full. Because she is now an athlete and somebody who cares a lot about how she does things physically, and she works out a lot. She's not overweight, but she recognizes that could be a problem for her, because she doesn't, a lot of times know when to stop, because she doesn't necessarily feel that she's full. And I think that manifests itself for our kids, those things, the pain things and the hunger things, in big ways, and all kinds of body things can, impact children differently. Children that were, that had a sexual abuse trauma have a body issue that's different even yet than that. And so there's, it's real, and it needs to be carefully addressed. And the body work is really, the body and sensory work is the only way I know to do that now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Obviously I would agree, and that's what I saw within my work with traumatized children as well. So, and that's why I started Kids Yoga Therapy, is to really start with the body, because we need it to be a bottom-up approach, and that's what any form of body or sensory work is. It's bottom-up instead of top-down. That just doesn't work.
Exactly.
And I'd love to hear from you, Julie. I mean, a lot of foster carers will watch this. I have a following of foster carers, and obviously a lot of parents who have children with various diagnoses, and they're very familiar with the large, explosive meltdowns and those behaviors that just simply exhaust you, and it's repetitive, and you get quite lost. So, and I know you mentioned that at the beginning with your daughter, she got to a certain point about 8 months after you had her, and that's what you started to see. And what I know you began to seek a network during that time, but when you were at home with your daughter, what helped you through those moments? I mean, what really altered, what needed to alter within that home or for your daughter that guided her through that point, and didn't leave you feeling like you needed to give up or you wanted to give up, because that's a huge issue as well.
It's hard. It's very hard, because a lot of times the behaviors, especially if they are, if they stem from an attachment disorder or attachment trauma, I guess, if you will, that relationship trauma will emerge. The behaviors will emerge as a direct, direct insult to the parent, a direct push away of the parent's attempt to be intimate and to have a relationship. And there's only so many times that you can take that as a parent before it starts to feel super personal, because sometimes it sounds super personal. They'll come in and say, I hate you and you can't make me, and, I wish that you would die. All of those really big things that a parent will go, some parents are just aghast with, and I was at first too, aghast with that. So hearing somebody else say you really can't take it personally because it's not coming from that place, they would do that. They would do that to protect themselves in a trauma protection way, regardless of who the mom or the dad is who's trying to make that connection. Yeah. The thing that really helped me as a parent grasp what I just said, because you can say that and they go, well, who are you, lady, to say that to me? The thing that helped me to grasp that was the understanding of of how brains are developed and what goes on in a traumatized brain, and to realize that what was happening, that the behavior my child was showing me was something that they really couldn't control. It wasn't as purposeful and as willful as it looked. It was a can't and not a won't, as we say at ATN. And because of that, I could then go, well, wait, if my child had a hearing problem or a vision problem, or they had some other disorder, then I could learn how not to take that personally, that they couldn't do those things. So now that I understand that it's because of how their brain has developed around these traumas that they have, then I don't have to take that as personally. I can start recognizing what they're doing, not as a willful disobedience of me, but as a symptom of the disorder that they have, of the problem that they have. And that helps me diffuse things. Now, to do that in any long term, I'm going to need lots of other people reminding me of that, because, there's only so many times the kid can spit in my face. My child was a spitter, and that was just more than I could take when she was like, 4 or 5 years old, and I would scoop her up and we'd sit down, to read the book or whatever, and she'd be in a seemingly good mood, and then all of a sudden, something inside of her would trigger and she would just spit on me.
Okay.
What the heck? Just not good. Yeah. And so I would need to call my friends at ATN or get on the computer that night and say, she spit on me again. What am I going to do? And one of the things that happens really, one of the things that parents learn quickly is that a lot of the parenting models that are built around therapeutic parenting have a playfulness component to it, and a way to sort of diffuse that for yourself that also helps diffuse it for the child. And so, so sometimes we had spitting contests. We would spit on the mirror just for fun, just you could spit the most spit, and sort of diffuse it that way. And try to do it in a way, obviously, that isn't going to build shame in the child, but is lighthearted and playful. And then it diffuses that as being something that gets a rise out of you, because the dynamic of her spitting on me was, she of course was trying to push me away. And if I wasn't going to be pushed away by remaining playful and engaged, then that meant that was something that couldn't be, used for that push away defense anymore. If that makes sense as you're thinking about it as a parent, that's, and each parent has to find their own kinds of things, but with the support of other parents and carers talking about that, it's, you can come up with clever ways to do that aren't that aren't done punitively, that aren't done sarcastically. It's hard to not be sarcastic a lot of times because you want to be sarcastic. It's that extra little, yeah, they really got underneath my skin, and it just makes me feel better to just say something sarcastic. But but you really, it's not good. It's not good to do that because our children, as disordered as their behaviors can be because of this trauma, are also always watching us really closely. Absolutely. The hypervigilance of, to see what we're reacting to, and what we're and what we're not reacting to, and how safe we are. So so it's hard. I mean, that being therapeutic to a child of trauma is probably, I think it's the world's most difficult thing. But it's also the world's most rewarding thing because they've all got hearts in there. That's the thing about it that really need to be healed, right? They all have got these healing, these hearts that once you get in there and you go in after that heart, you find this marvelous person on the inside that really wants to connect, but it's, there's just walls and walls sometimes after these kids. And so that leads me, I guess, to the other thing that I think parents need to be real purposeful about, and I'm still not super good about it, although I'm better than I was 20 years ago, and that's doing things for yourself, taking care of yourself. You've got to. And so you've got to do, the yoga would be great for all of us. We all need to do that because we're all developing a certain amount of that secondary trauma around what's happening in our homes. And so, but we've got to be very purposeful about it. We've got to get the respite in place. We've got to take the breaks. We've got to go do whatever it is, whether it's a walk or whether it's a workout in the gym or whatever it is that you need. And if you've got a partner or a significant other, you've got to have a date night. There's just you must do those things. They're not niceties that you throw on at the end if you happen to have any energy. They're things that you need to schedule, because only when you do those things are you going to be able to put it up with the spitting. You're just not going to make it otherwise. You're going to drown in spit or whatever it is that your child is doing, right? Yeah. So you've got to do it and make it a priority. And I know it's scary, and sometimes we're afraid to leave our children with substitute caregivers because who knows what they're going to do or what the caregiver is going to think. But you've just got to create that situation for yourself, because you're no good to the children and your family if you can't hold it together in all of that. The hope the hope that I can offer is that if you do all of those things, it will. And I can't say for everybody all the time it'll get easier, but it will get easier. I mean, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is healing that can happen. I see it way more often than not when parents are able to dig in, find the external resources to support them, and really learn and do the therapeutic parenting. I see incredible healing and incredible growth for everybody. I'm a way healthier person emotionally than I was 20 years ago when I didn't even know I needed to be. I mean, I can say that there are lots of parents that do say that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Julie. That was a beautiful outline and beautiful explanation of everything. And I absolutely love what you do when you said you bring playfulness into it. I think, the both spitting on the mirror, I think that's so perfect. And I think that's a really key giveaway from this talk, because they're the moments when you really feel like you need to lose it. And, the parents I speak to in crisis mode, they don't know what to do. And you've got that playfulness factor when you say it's a can't, not a won't, they can't respond in a healthier way. So work with it and take away that shame and that guilt, because it is there afterwards. These children are not silly. They are far beyond their years. They're very intelligent. They're hyper vigilant, as you say, and there is a lot of shame and guilt, but it's the can't, not a won't. So thank you.
Right.
That was perfect. And I mean, I'd love for you to share. You said there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So with your daughter, she's doing some pretty amazing things now. So
She
I'd
is.
love for you to share
Yes.
what she's up to now.
Okay, sure. She graduated from high school, which we consider that a major accomplishment because there were a variety, and this isn't always the case with children from trauma, but it is often the case with children from significant early neglect. She had a whole host of other things going on, a lot of processing problems and other things that made school difficult for her.
Yeah.
And then her frustration with all of that, because she is pretty smart, but you know, if you can't learn, if the message can't come in, no matter how smart you are, you get really frustrated.
Yeah.
So then she had lots of behaviors there too. So we had a lot of challenge in finding her the appropriate ways to educate her. And once we did, she took off. She educated online and learned how to navigate on an online system really well. That's not for everybody. It was for her, and she was able to graduate with honors, and then has recently finished a job training program that focuses on helping with social emotional type training. And then are helping to place her. And so she has one small part-time job, and then is also interviewing and working with a job coach for others. But she, about 5 years ago, took up swimming, which works out really well for her because she doesn't do well in competitive team kind of sports. So this personal stuff is good for her. Yeah. And a little bit earlier than that, started therapeutic horseback riding. So both of those things are incredibly important to her. She works very hard for both of them. She's now, you know, an equestrian that can jump and do all kinds of things on the horse, as well as get a lot of the sensory therapeutic input from the horse, which is fantastic. Absolutely. And the emotional connection of caring for the horse, which is fantastic. She's got a great instructor who understands the value of all of that. So it's really important. But she is a swimming fiend. She just swims like nobody's business. And there's something about that water and that movement that is highly calming to her. Yeah. So she got involved in and I wish they had them in every town across the country, a parent-created special needs swim team where the children and young adults that swim in this team have a variety of invisible disabilities, mostly everything from autism and other mental illnesses to trauma. And the coach is, you know, very patient with that, and patient in figuring out who can go to what kind of swim meet. So she got involved in this and is now swimming at the international level, and in a precursor to the Paralympics categories. And so she went to Mexico in 2017. Yes. 2017? Yes. I got my years mixed up. And then this year, Team USA will be coming to Australia in October, and she's hoping to be a part of that. She's qualified with the Times. She doesn't have her official notifications of that yet, but she started doing, you know, some additional individual training to train up for that. So it's a big deal, and it's we're excited about it. It's not necessarily, you know. The other thing I guess I would say to parents is that as you live 20 years with a child who's been impacted by trauma, some of them will make significant healing progress to the point that your early expectations of them will be totally met. And some of them, like mine, who really meet that whole developmental trauma criteria, you'll adjust your expectations because there is a lifelong impact. I mean, while I give you all the hope that you know there's this significant healing, my daughter has healed significantly, but she's always going to be impacted by her early beginnings, and we know that now that we've lived through it. And she's learned to accommodate for that, and she's learned. You know, we're all exploring what her adulthood looks like. It doesn't look like the other 3 children in our house, as you know, they're all grown and gone and have their lives that are totally independent, and her life is independent as she can handle it.
Yeah.
And we're working on that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine and it's actually good for her. And she's amazing. She's got an amazingly giant, kind, and compassionate heart that that nobody knew was there 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
that's super cool.
Yeah, yeah. And makes it all worth it, Julie.
It does, and I used to not really like her very much, and now I like her a great deal on top of loving her. So that's important.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. That's great. And so I guess probably coming to the end of our chat today, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
So is there I guess well, first of all, we'll give everybody a go-to method to get in touch with the ATN or the programs. What's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Through our website is probably the best way. You can go attachtrauma.org is the fastest to type in, ATTACH trauma.org. Attachmenttraumanetwork.org will take you there too. And you can sign up to be a free member there. You can read the information that's there. You can, there are emails and things that if you need to get in touch with us for a question. We also have a very large Facebook following. So if you want to go to Facebook and connect us through social media there, we don't answer the direct questions there quite as fast as Jessica discovered probably, but we do answer them.
You were pretty good.
So we do try to respond as quickly as possible to those messages.
Yeah, amazing. And is there anything else that you'd like to add, Julie? Anything, the one piece of advice that you would just like to end on, or it can be anything. Is there one thing that you would like to end today with?
I don't know.
Either for the children or for the parents. Yeah.
Don't give up. Don't take it personally. I know that that's hard, but you're not alone in that, because we're all we're all out here working on that healing together, and you can do it.
Yeah, perfect. I think that sums up everything you've said today really beautifully. So I thank you so much, Julie, for chatting with me today, and you've really captured the experience perfectly. Really insightful, and I know this information is going to be really useful for everybody watching this.
Good. So reach out to us if we can help you.
Yep, absolutely. And I might, wherever this goes, I'll put the link to your website underneath as well. And for those of you that are within Australia, then obviously kidsyogatherapy.com.au if you're looking for those body therapies and that support network with other like-minded parents as well. Then do get in touch with me, and I can guide you through the programs that we offer here as well. So there's always a lot of support out there, and it's just about reaching out to us. So again, thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.